Welcome to BL Stories, where romance, drama, and unforgettable boys' love come to life. Love knows no limits, and the best stories aren't always straight. Subscribe now and join our growing BL-loving family. Chapter 16. I glanced down at Hadley and then back up at my father, realizing I hadn't formally introduced the little girl holding my hand. "No," I said, leading them into the house. "She's Xander's." My father settled onto the couch while Xander, Hadley, and I took the one across from him. Xander calmly met my father's gaze as Hadley clambered onto his lap. "She is?" my father asked, a hint of surprise in his voice. "Yeah," Xander replied gently. "Her name is Hadley." He didn't say more, and my father turned to Hadley, giving her a warm, soft smile. "She's adorable," he said. Xander tickled her gently, and she giggled in his arms. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I hope Jasper is setting a good example," my father remarked, and I laughed softly. "He'll be a great father someday," Xander assured him, and I felt a small smile tug at my lips. We chatted for a while longer, enjoying the simple, comfortable atmosphere, until it was time to leave. I had assignments to catch up on, and Dre would need to reteach me all the material I'd missed in lectures. I suggested that Xander and Hadley head to his car first so I could say a quick goodbye to my father. Once they were out of sight, my father turned to me. "Is he responsible?" "Yes," I replied. "He does well in school and is always there for his daughter." "Is that so?" my father said, studying me carefully. "He seems like a good young man." I agreed. "I'm happy for you," he said sincerely. "Thank you," I said with a grin. "That means a lot." We shared a brief hug before I headed toward the door. Once I slipped into the passenger seat, Xander eased out of the driveway and onto the road. "Your father was more accepting than I expected," Xander said. "I guess," I shrugged. "I figured it'd be okay since I already came out to him. He even asked how he could support me." "And?" Xander asked, curious. "I just told him to be there for us, for me and you," I said. Xander's lips curved into a soft smile as he focused on the road. "Awesome," he said. "I finally have a dad." I leaned over and rested my hand on his as he drove with one hand. "Yeah," I said. "I hope so." "What do you mean?" he asked. "He's trying to be a father now," I said quietly. "But it hasn't always been that way. He's slowly learning and growing." "I see," Xander replied, squeezing my hand gently. "I hope so too." Later that evening, I returned to my dorm. Dre was at his desk, scribbling notes furiously. "Is this correct?" a voice I didn't recognize asked. It was soft and distinctly female. I looked up to see a girl I had met once before sitting beside Dre, her hair in a neat ponytail and glasses perched on her nose. She was pointing at her notebook. Dre glanced at her work, smiled brightly, and gave a thumbs up. "Good job." I laughed. "Where's this energy when you tutor me?" Dre spun around, eyes wide. "When did you get here?" "I just did," I said. "Didn't you hear me?" "No," he admitted. "You're too busy focusing on someone else," I teased, grinning. "Maybe," he said, smiling back. "Are you joining us?" "In a minute," I said. "I need help with a different subject anyway." I didn't want to interrupt their study session, so I set my backpack down and pulled out my phone. I noticed a missed call from Hayden and called him back. "Hey, Jasper," Hayden answered. "Hey," I said. "What's up?" "Nothing much. I was wondering if you wanted to study biomechanics together," he replied. I sat up. "I was just about to head to the library. You can come along if you want." Hayden chuckled. "Okay, I'll be there in 20 minutes. "Great," I said, hopping off the bed. "See you soon." Dre raised an eyebrow as I grabbed my backpack. "Where are you going?" "I know you need help with biomechanics." "I'm heading to the library," I said. "Hayden and I are going to tackle it together." "Good luck," Dre said. "It's tough material." "Thanks," I said with a smile. I waved to May before leaving. It took only a few minutes to reach the library, but Hayden wasn't there yet. I set my backpack down and rested my head on the table, closing my eyes as I usually did when I arrived early. Minutes later, I heard a chair pull back across from me. I lifted my head to see Hayden smiling warmly. I returned his smile before he spoke. "Good to see you," he said. Chapter 17. I hadn't meant to, but my mind wandered, and I found myself thinking about Hayden's confession. It was impossible not to, especially with him sitting just a few inches across from me. Even so, I forced myself to stay calm and natural as I spoke. "Yeah," I said. "Good to see you." He just smiled, then pulled out his materials and laid them on the table. I sifted through my own notes, which, unsurprisingly, were mostly useless, and let out a small sigh. Hayden laughed. "We can share mine." "Thanks," I said. He positioned his notebook horizontally so we could both see it more easily, and then, to make things even simpler, he moved to sit beside me. It felt strange, though. I'd been in love with him for so long, yet now I only felt friendship. His feelings, however, had shifted too, though in the opposite direction. That, in itself, was unsettling. I focused on his notes, trying to absorb something, anything. Almost everything looked foreign, and my heart sank. The exam in 2 days felt impossible. I rubbed my forehead and exhaled. "None of this makes sense to me," I admitted. "I figured," Hayden said, nudging me lightly. "You're always doodling instead of taking notes." I frowned. "How do you know?" "You sit next to me, Jasper," he replied with a smile. "It's hard not to notice." "I never look at your notes," I said, laughing. "Ouch," he said playfully, and I raised an eyebrow. "We didn't touch, not really." "What?" I asked. "Nothing," he said, gesturing toward the notebook. "Let's start before the library closes." I nodded, and Hayden began explaining the concepts. Slowly, I started to understand some of it, concentrating hard on every word. After a while, I felt a warm hand slide over mine on the table, and I jumped slightly, eyes widening. "Sorry," Hayden said softly. "I remembered when you did this for me before." I laughed nervously. "Yeah, I was just trying to cheer you up after your breakup with Paisley." "Oh," he said, slowly withdrawing his hand. "I was hoping it was for a different reason." I forced a laugh, awkward but light. "Nope. Just making sure you were okay." He smiled faintly. "Thank you." I focused back on the notes, letting the moment pass. An hour later, we packed up. Walking out into the chilly evening, I rubbed my hands together for warmth and looked up at the stars. "One more day to study for the exam," Hayden said as we walked. "Yeah," I murmured, glancing down. "I'm screwed." Hayden nudged my shoulder lightly. "No, you're not. I'll help you again tomorrow." "I need it," I admitted. "Hopefully Dre can join us too." "Yeah," he agreed, and we reached my dorm. I realized he had walked me back and raised an eyebrow. "You parked at the library," I said as I keyed into the building. "Why are you here?" "Thought I'd walk you back," he said with a shrug. "Oh," I said softly. "Thanks. I'll see you tomorrow." "Okay," he said, hands in his pockets. "See you." I went inside, kicked off my shoes, and collapsed on my bed. "What's wrong?" Dre asked from his bed. "I'm conflicted," I said, resting my arms across my forehead. "About what?" he asked. "Lover boy or lover boy number 2? "Lover boy number 2, I replied. "Hayden," Dre said with a grin. Cupid was right about this love triangle, huh?" I groaned. "I don't know what to do. I feel guilty every time I see him." "There's nothing you can do, Jasp," Dre said. "He knows your feelings and understands. Don't stress, it's not your fault." "I guess," I admitted. "But I know how he feels. I've been there." "And you got over it?" Dre said. "He will too." I sighed and idly scrolled through my phone until a new follow request caught my eye. My heart skipped when I recognized the profile picture. Kaysen Miller. I accepted and scrolled through his photos. Many were of him with his car, his family, and friends I had met at the bar. Rocco goofed in a few pictures, making me laugh. "Hey," I said to Dre, "I think you and Rocco would get along." Dre chuckled. "Because we're both nerds?" "No," I said, grinning. "Because you're both funny." He shook his head, returning to his homework. I kept scrolling and found a photo of a striking boy with emerald eyes, grinning widely, his arm draped around Xander. The caption read, "Wouldn't want to spend New Year's with anyone else." The date indicated it was from high school. I remembered what someone had told me at the bar. I always thought Kaysen and Xander would end up together. Well, they hadn't. I quickly closed the app before accidentally liking the photo and exhaled. I wouldn't let Kaysen get in my way. Chapter 18. A week passed quickly, though I won't bore you with the details. It had been uneventful, except for one thing you're probably wondering about, my biomechanics exam. Let's just say, it didn't go well. I bombed it. As usual. Still, I wasn't too worried. There were a few more exams ahead where I could try to raise my grade. Not that I had much confidence, I made myself laugh nervously. Actually, I was really nervous. But thinking about it too much wouldn't help, so I pushed the thoughts aside. Anyway, sorry for the jumbled thoughts. It was Wednesday, and I wasn't sure what the evening had in store. I hoped I could see Xander since Dre was going out to meet May. He was excited, they hadn't seen each other in a while. Classes dragged on as usual, and by the time I returned to my dorm, I was exhausted. Dre was busy getting ready for his date, straightening his clothes and fixing his hair in the tiny mirror at his desk. "Damn, Dre," I said. "You actually look really nice." Dre turned, frowning. "What do you mean actually? I always look nice." "You're right," I said with a grin. "Best looking guy out there." He nodded and adjusted his bow tie. "That's the smartest thing you've ever said, Jasp." I laughed and flopped onto my bed. "Yeah. Now hurry up and get out of here. May's probably waiting." Dre jumped and scurried to the door, glancing back at me. "Good luck, man," I called. "Use those Cupid skills of yours." "Yup," he said with a smile, and he was gone. I let out a long sigh, staring at the ceiling. I could catch up on assignments, but we all know that wouldn't happen. Instead, I called Xander. "Hey, Jasper," he answered after a few rings. "Hey," I said. "What are you doing tonight?" "I was thinking of going to Rocco's," Xander said. "He's having a small party." "Oh," I muttered. "Damn. I just wanted to spend time with him alone." "Wanna come?" he asked. "Sure," I said, realizing that would be the only way to see him tonight. "I'll tell Hayden," Xander said. I felt a twinge of awkwardness that Xander didn't know about Hayden's confession, but somehow, I felt it didn't matter. "Okay," I replied. "I'll be at your dorm in an hour," Xander said before hanging up. I quickly changed clothes, silently cursing myself. Kaysen would probably be there, and I wasn't in the mood for his antics. An hour later, Xander arrived, and I slid into the passenger's seat of his car. "Hi," I said, just before I felt his warm hand touch my cheek. I turned toward him, and for a moment, my stomach fluttered as he softly pressed his lips to mine. "Hey," he said, grinning after he pulled back. "Ready?" I nodded, speechless for a moment, wishing I could continue what we'd started, but Xander just started driving. Well, later would have to do. About 10 minutes later, we arrived at Rocco's house, and Hayden pulled up at the same time. The three of us approached the front door, which Rocco opened with a warm smile. "Jasper and Hayden," he said. "Nice to see you guys." I smiled and thanked him, letting Xander lead us toward the kitchen. Loud music thumped in the background as we maneuvered through the crowd. Xander handed us each a drink, and we began looking for Rocco again, until Xander's shoulder was pulled. We turned to see Kaysen, the blonde with the usual smirk, standing across from us. I rolled my eyes. "Kaysen," Xander said calmly. "What's up?" "Nothing much," Kaysen replied. "I see you brought guests." Xander shrugged. "They're friends of Rocco too, so they're welcome." Hayden and I watched the exchange awkwardly. I hadn't noticed, but my fist was clenched at my side. Soon, Rocco called us over. They were going to play a game in the living room. About 15 people, mostly girls, sat in a circle. Xander, Hayden, Rocco, Kaysen, and I joined them. Rocco explained the rules. "You all know spin the bottle, right? But there's a twist," he said. "If it lands on you, you either complete the dare you picked beforehand or take a drink." "Great. Who wants to go first?" Rocco asked. Of course, Kaysen volunteered. He spun the bottle, pointing with a grin. "Whoever these lands on have to kiss me," he declared. I muttered under my breath, "Stupid," and hoped no one heard. That was basically the original rule anyway. The bottle spun and stopped, pointing at Xander. My heart sank. Kaysen smirked and approached him, hand cupping Xander's cheek. I tensed, ready to intervene, but I didn't have to. Xander simply reached for his drink and took a sip instead. Chapter 19. It seemed like no one had any faith in Xander at all. From the start, I'd seen comments like, "Oh, he's about to cheat," or, "I bet they're going to break up." Seriously, have some faith in my boyfriend. Anyway, the game continued. Kaysen took his seat across the circle, clearly disappointed that he hadn't gotten to kiss Xander. He should have known better, trying would only embarrass him. By now, the room was a mess. Clothes were scattered from various dares, some people were a little tipsy from taking drinks, and others watched with wide smiles, entertained by the chaos. Rocco stood in the center of the circle and placed his hand on the bottle. After a brief pause, he said, "The next person has to give me a hug." Laughter erupted around the room. "Cute," one of the girls commented, while a few others crossed their fingers in hopes that the bottle would land on them. Rocco gave the bottle a soft spin, and it finally landed on a quiet boy who had been observing since arriving. Xander chuckled and nudged Hayden. "Come on, it's your turn." Hayden sighed, but the crowd watched with smiles rather than teasing. It seemed everyone was just enjoying the game. Finally, Hayden stood, and Rocco offered a small, encouraging smile with his arms open. "Come on, bud," Rocco said. Hayden laughed and hugged him briefly before they released each other, and Rocco returned to his seat. After a few more rounds, the game ended, and some guests began leaving. I yawned and stretched, feeling increasingly tired. Xander leaned into me, wrapping an arm around my waist, and I responded by looping my arm around him. "Tired?" he asked softly. I nodded. He gave a small smile and approached Rocco to thank him for hosting, letting him know we were leaving. We were about to step outside when a familiar voice made me roll my eyes. Kaysen. "Hold up," he called as Xander, and I turned to face him. "Yeah?" Xander asked, his arms still around me. Kaysen glanced briefly at my waist before meeting Xander's gaze and forcing a smile. "You're leaving early," Kaysen said. "You should come back after you drop him off." Xander's hand tightened slightly around my side. "I'm not dropping him off." "You're not?" I asked, leaning closer, our faces just inches apart. Xander grinned, glancing at my lips. "You're coming home with me." I raised an eyebrow and smirked back, ignoring Kaysen's frustrated sigh. "No time for friends now, huh?" Kaysen asked. "Now that you've got a boyfriend." "I just made time for you all earlier," Xander replied, frowning. "What are you talking about?" Kaysen sighed, words trailing off. I knew exactly what he wanted to say. "You want to spend time with Xander, right?" I asked. Kaysen's eyes widened, confirmed. "We'll catch up another day, Kaysen," Xander said firmly. "But we're both tired. It's time to head home." Kaysen looked down. "Fine," he muttered. Xander removed his arm from my waist and slid his fingers into mine. We turned away and walked to his car. Once I was in the passenger seat, Xander reached over and held my hand. I glanced down at it, feeling a rush of warmth. He smiled at me, leaning closer to brush a quick kiss against my cheek. I melted into the moment, heart racing, but we pulled back before things escalated further. "I can't wait," Xander said with a grin as he started the car. He hadn't had much to drink, so he was fine to drive. Then I realized I hadn't said goodbye to Hayden. "Oh no," I murmured. "What's wrong?" Xander asked. "I didn't tell Hayden we were leaving," I admitted. "Ah," he said, glancing over. "That's right." Meanwhile, back at Rocco's house, Hayden was helping clean up. "Thanks, man," Rocco said, bending down to grab a can. "You really don't have to do this." "It's fine," Hayden replied. "I couldn't leave all this for you alone." Rocco laughed. "I'm used to it, but thanks for staying." "Wow," Hayden said, placing a can into a bag. "That's surprising." "Well," Rocco said with a smile, "not everyone's as thoughtful as you." Chapter 20. A few days passed, and I found myself lying on my bed with nothing to do on a Saturday morning. Dre had made sure I finished all my homework, and with no upcoming exams, we both had a rare free morning. Surprisingly, Dre didn't have any assignments to review either. He usually spent at least a little time studying for fun. We stayed in bed for most of the morning until Dre groaned loudly and forced himself to get up. I stretched before following him to the bathroom. Once we were dressed and ready for the day, we returned to our beds and sat down. "Well," Dre said, "now what?" I exhaled and thought for a moment but couldn't come up with anything interesting. "I don't know," I admitted. "Call up Xander or Hayden," Dre suggested. "See what they're up to." I figured Xander was probably spending time with his daughter, as he usually does on Saturdays, so I called Hayden first. "Hey," Hayden answered after a few rings. "What's up, Jasper?" "Hi," I said. "Nothing much. Dre's really bored." "So are you," Dre yelled in the background, making Hayden laugh. "Don't make this about me," Dre added. "Wanna come over?" Hayden asked. I glanced at Dre, who grinned and nodded. "Yeah," I said. "We'll be over soon." "Thanks." "Anytime," Hayden replied, and we ended the call. Dre and I hopped out of bed again and made our way to the campus parking lot. My father had finally fixed my car, so we could drive ourselves to Hayden's without needing an Uber. A little while later, we arrived at Hayden's. He opened the door with a smile, and we headed to his basement, settling onto his couch as usual. Hayden turned on the television, and we started watching a random movie that was already halfway over. It was hard to follow the plot, but none of us felt like picking a new movie. I stretched my arms and yawned. Bumping my shoulder playfully, Hayden asked, "Bored?" I smiled and shrugged. "What do you guys want to do?" I asked. Dre stayed quiet, still recovering from his earlier energy. "Anything's fine with me," Hayden said. "Though I'm surprised you're not spending time with Xander today. You two seem inseparable lately." "Oh," I said with a pang of guilt. I hadn't been spending much time with Hayden recently. "He's probably out." I decided not to mention Xander's daughter. I wasn't sure if they knew, and it didn't feel like my place to tell them. We sat in quiet for a few minutes until Hayden glanced at his phone, noticing an incoming call. He raised an eyebrow at the name displayed and swiped to answer. "Rocco," Hayden said into the phone. Dre and I exchanged surprised looks. "Yeah, later today?" Hayden replied, nodding as he listened. He hung up, and Dre was immediately curious. "What was that about?" he asked, wiggling his eyebrows. I laughed and Dre grinned. "It was Rocco," Hayden said. "The guy whose house." "We know who he is," I interrupted. Hayden smiled. "Well, what did he want?" Dre pressed. "Why so curious?" Hayden teased. "This is the most excitement we've had today," Dre explained. "We've been bored out of our minds. Now that something interesting is happening, I need all the details." Hayden laughed. He asked if I wanted to meet up tonight at Luna's Denver. He said a band is playing, and we can grab ice cream or something afterward. "Why?" Dre asked. I was glad he asked before I could, because I was curious too. "Just to thank me for helping clean up after the party," Hayden explained. "Oh," I said. "You stayed to clean?" "Yeah," Hayden said with a grin. "After you and Xander left without saying goodbye." My heart sank. "Sorry, Hayden. We didn't mean to." He nudged my shoulder playfully. "I'm kidding. I just thought it was the right thing to do, so Rocco didn't have to do it alone." "That was really thoughtful of you," I said. "Very thoughtful," Dre added, grinning. "My God," I groaned. "Enough with the Cupid jokes." Dre laughed and Hayden looked at us, curious. "Cupid?" "Nothing," I said, waving it off. The afternoon passed quickly. We played pool, watched boxing, and snacked on Hayden's food. Eventually, it was time to head back, as it was getting late and Hayden had plans for the evening. I smiled at my friend as we walked out. "Thanks for having us," I said. "Always, Jasper," he replied, returning my smile. Chapter 21. "We need to go to Luna's den tonight, Jasp." I laughed at my roommate. "You're so nosy, Dre." "You know I live for this stuff," he said, grinning. I sighed. We had just returned to our dorm, and already it was time to head out again. But wouldn't that be kind of weird? I asked. Showing up just to watch? Nah, Dre said. I happen to like Wingspan, the band that's playing tonight. Oh yeah. I raised an eyebrow, skeptical. What's your favorite song? Zipline, he replied without hesitation. I'm serious, Jasp. I actually like them. I shrugged. I'll give you that, they are good. The main singer had a raspy voice that drew everyone in, blending soothing melodies with occasional rock elements. They were genuinely talented. We'd better stay low-key, I said finally. Can't risk Hayden seeing us. Of course, Dre said, holding up a blue baseball cap and placing it on his head with a grin. Great disguise, I said sarcastically. Nobody will ever recognize you. I won't wear my glasses either, Dre added. I'm sure no one's paying attention to the people around them anyway. Whatever, I said, pulling on a sweatshirt and hoisting the hood over my head. I tightened the strings so the fabric framed my face. Your disguise is good too, Dre exclaimed. I laughed, adjusting the hood just enough to see. I pulled out my phone. Maybe I should invite Xander. He was probably home after spending the day with Hadley. Hey, Jasper, Xander answered after a few rings. Hi, I said. Want to come to Luna's den with me and Dre? I heard Xander's sigh on the other end, and I frowned. What's wrong? I asked. You don't want to? No, it's not that, he replied. I'm out at the moment. Oh, I said, guessing he was still with his daughter. Then another voice spoke in the background. Xander, hurry up, we're about to start. My stomach sank. You're with Kaysen? I asked, trying to keep my tone casual. Yeah, Xander admitted. And a few others. Okay, I said, pursing my lips. Have fun. I didn't wait for him to respond and ended the call. I knew I shouldn't feel upset, he had other friends, but I couldn't shake the little pang in my chest at the thought of him being with Kaysen. I tossed my phone onto the bed and refused to take it with me. Petty? Maybe. But I couldn't help it. I led Dre to my car in a sour mood, and he seemed to sense it, softly patting my shoulder as he climbed into the passenger seat. It's okay, Jasp, Dre offered. I'm sure he'd rather be with you right now. Sure, I muttered, unconvinced, but I forced myself to shake off the negative thoughts and started the car. About 10 minutes later, we arrived at Luna's Denver. The restaurant was dimly lit as usual. I scanned the room for Hayden or Rocco, hiding behind the host as we followed. Once seated at a small table, I instantly spotted them across the room, sharing laughs and occasionally enjoying their ice cream. Where are they? Dre asked, craning his neck. Stop, I whispered. They'll notice if you look too obvious. They're all the way over there, I added, nodding in their direction. Dre slowly turned and spotted them, grinning. Cute, he whispered. I laughed softly. Soon, Wingspan took the stage and the chatter in the room quieted. Regular patrons seemed completely absorbed in the music. The lead singer, Milo, with tan skin and curly brown hair, introduced the band before starting the first song. It was mesmerizing, and Hayden and Rocco watched intently. A few minutes later, I saw Hayden push his ice cream toward Rocco, who took a small bite. Oh, Dre whispered. Interesting development. Shut up, I laughed, nudging him. After several songs, the band took a break. Milo wandered through the restaurant and greeted a boy with dark hair, placing a hand on his cheek and offering a quick, friendly kiss on the lips. It was bold, but I admired the authenticity. Milo returned to the front and Rocco waved him over. He scribbled something on a napkin and handed it to Rocco, who then passed it to Hayden. Dre gasped. Lucky, he whispered. Rocco just got Milo's autograph. I noticed the boy who had been kissed snicker quietly. I gestured for Dre to keep it down. I didn't want Hayden or Rocco to notice us. Hayden smiled warmly at the autograph, and I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe they really would become good friends. They seemed to get along well, I told Dre. Probably going to be great friends. Dre giggled and his laughter made me smile. What was that? I asked. Cupid senses more than friends, Jasp, he teased. I rolled my eyes but couldn't hide my grin. Chapter 22. going to Luna's den had distracted me from thinking about Xander spending time with Kaysen, until I returned to my dorm and saw my phone lying where I had left it. I turned it on and scanned the messages from classmates asking about assignments I didn't have answers for. Honestly, I wasn't sure why they expected me to. I was about to ask them the same thing. After letting them know I had no clue about the work, I scrolled through my missed calls. 5 missed calls in a row caught my eye. That had never happened before. I squinted at the name on the screen. I sank back onto my bed, and Dre peeked over. "Kaysen?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "Kind of," I muttered. I didn't feel like calling my boyfriend back, especially since he was with Xander and I hadn't answered any of Xander's calls either. "You need to call him back, Jasp," Dre said. "Communication is important. You know that." I sighed and held my phone above my face, staring at the ceiling. I knew I had to accept that Xander had other friends. He couldn't devote all his time to me, no matter how much I wished he could. "I guess," I said and tapped his contact. The phone rang a few times before going to voicemail. "Ugh," I muttered, tossing the phone onto my bed. "No answer." "Dreas?" "No," I replied. "It's late now, Jasp," he said. "He's probably asleep." "Whatever," I said, pretending it didn't bother me. "Don't overthink it," Dre advised. "Go to sleep. You can talk it out tomorrow." I murmured, trying to believe him. The next morning, I woke up with a pounding headache. Groaning, I sat up and closed my eyes for a few more seconds, until I heard whispering from across the room. Sure enough, Dre was hunched over his desk, whispering into his phone. "Okay, my beautiful May," I heard him say. I snickered and he spun around, finger to his lips. No shame at all. I grinned and got up, rummaging for an Advil. After swallowing the pill, I checked my phone and froze. Another missed call. From Xander. At 4 in the morning. As if I was going to answer then. I sighed and waited until Dre finished his call before dialing back. "Hey," Xander answered almost immediately. "Hi," I said, keeping it short. "It's about time," he said. "I've been trying to reach you all night." "Yeah," I replied. "I forgot my phone at Luna's Denver." "Oh," Xander said. "I thought you were avoiding me." I hesitated. "Nah," I lied. "How was your night?" "Uneventful, honestly," he admitted. "I wish I could have seen you instead." A smile crept across my face, and my whole body relaxed. "Me too," I said. Xander laughed, and warmth spread through my chest. "What are you doing tonight?" he asked. "Nothing." "Why?" I looked up at the ceiling. "Come to my house," he said. "Around 8. "What's the occasion?" I asked, though it didn't matter. I just wanted to see him. "Kaysen's having a party," Xander said. My heart sank. "For what?" I stammered. "He's transferring to our university," Xander explained. "He wants to meet the friend group." "Oh," I said, disappointed. More opportunities for Kaysen to see Xander, and I wasn't thrilled about it. "You don't want to go?" Xander asked. "No, it's not that," I said quickly. "I'll go." "Good," Xander said. "See you at 8. The call ended, and I glanced at Dre, busy scribbling in his notebook. I didn't mention the conversation to him. The rest of the day dragged on, and by 8 o'clock, I found myself dreading the night. I wasn't in the mood for Kaysen. "Where are you going?" Dre asked suspiciously. "Xander's," I said, skipping over the party detail. "Oh, I have fun," he grinned. "But not too much fun." "Oh, I will," I said sarcastically, then left. Xander greeted me warmly at the door, pulling me into a hug. I melted into him, feeling safe and happy. He released me after a moment, eyes scanning me with a playful smirk. "Cute," he said. "Shut up," I laughed. He laughed too, before asking if I was ready to go to Kaysen's. But my mouth betrayed me. Words slipped out I hadn't meant to say just yet. "Can I talk to you first?" Chapter 23. It wasn't something I wanted to bring up. The topic was sensitive and I knew it. But if I didn't address it soon, I'd just end up overthinking and worrying needlessly. I needed reassurance. Xander raised an eyebrow at my sudden seriousness, his expression curious. Our relationship hadn't been tested yet, and I wasn't about to let anyone, especially Kaysen, come between us. When he stayed silent, I took a deep breath, ready for the conversation neither of us wanted but both of us needed. I shoved my hands into my pockets and looked at the floor in Xander's entryway. "Listen," I started, "I don't want to seem paranoid or annoying." "You're not," Xander interrupted, waving his hand. He guided me to the living room, and we sat across from each other. I wiped my hands on my pants, trying to calm the nervous sweat forming. "I noticed something was off," Xander said softly. "Or that something's bothering you." "You did?" Best surprised. "I'm sorry." "Don't apologize," he said. "Just tell me." "It's not you," I explained carefully. "There's someone who's been making me feel uneasy." Xander leaned back, studying me. "Hayden?" he guessed with a laugh, trying to lighten the mood. "Yeah," I said, not exactly lying. "But there's someone else too." "Wait a second," Xander asked. "What's Hayden doing to make you uncomfortable?" "Nothing," I said quickly. "I was joking. It's actually Kaysen." Xander was quiet for a few moments, and my stomach twisted with anxiety. Was he upset that I didn't trust his friend? "Why Kaysen?" he asked gently, unaware of Kaysen's attempts to get close to him. I exhaled, wishing I hadn't brought it up, but I couldn't keep it inside. "How was your relationship with him before?" I asked. Xander frowned, thinking. "I met him around the same time I met Vivi." My heart sank slightly at the name, and I opened my mouth to respond, but he continued. "Rocco came around then too, and we all hung out a lot after school. I thought Kaysen was a good friend back then, but after Vivi passed, I realized who my real friends were. Kaysen was one of them. He was always there when no one else knew how to handle me." I stayed quiet, absorbing his words. "Why are you curious about this?" he asked, sitting up straighter. "You two seem really close," I admitted. "And he seems—" My voice faltered, and Xander moved closer, sitting beside me. "Seems what?" he asked, his eyes gentle and probing. "Like he's trying to get closer to you," I said, my face warming. Xander's eyes softened as he looked down, then back at me. "You're worried he'll take me away from you?" he asked. "Somewhat," I admitted, unable to meet his gaze. He lifted a hand, resting it on my chest. A warm rush of comfort spread through me as he shifted closer. "I love you, Jasper," he whispered. I shivered at the sincerity in his voice. "And I'll never stop loving you," he continued, giving me a reassuring smile. I wrapped my arms around him, holding him for a moment before he pressed a gentle kiss to my lips. My worries melted away as I kissed him back, feeling the calm certainty of his words. "I will never leave you," Xander said softly. "For Kaysen or anyone else. Don't worry about him." I nodded, my head spinning from the intensity of our conversation and the warmth of his presence. "And I'm sorry you felt uneasy," Xander added. "I didn't realize he made you uncomfortable." "It's okay," I said. "I'm sorry too." He smiled and I returned it, feeling lighter than I had all day. "I love you, Xander," I said. Before we left, Xander ran upstairs to check on his sister, Paisley, who was watching Hadley that evening. Once he confirmed everything was fine, he came back down and met me by the door. "Do you still want to go?" he asked. "We don't have to." I appreciated his consideration and shook my head. "Yeah. I want to see everyone again, minus Kaysen, of course." He grinned, slipping his hand into mine, and we headed to his car. After a short drive, we arrived at Kaysen's house. Xander led me to the porch and knocked. Kaysen opened the door, his blonde hair perfectly styled and blue eyes sparkling as they flicked between us. "Jasper," Kaysen said with a smirk. "Good to see you," I replied, keeping my voice calm, though my heart raced. Chapter 24. It was difficult to face Kaysen after the conversation I'd had with Xander. He knew my suspicions, and though I didn't fully trust Kaysen, I had a strong feeling about his motives. I hadn't really wanted to come tonight, but I didn't want to hold Xander back from having fun. Kaysen was his friend, and there was nothing I could do about that, no matter how much I wished things were different. When we walked in, loud music blared through Kaysen's house. People moved to the rhythm, chatted in clusters, and carried drinks in their hands. I made my way to the kitchen and spotted a familiar figure leaning on the counter. Hayden, chatting with someone I hadn't expected to see, Rocco. "Hey guys," I said, smiling. "I didn't know you were coming, Hayden." Hayden smiled back and gestured toward Rocco. "This guy's been dragging me everywhere tonight," he said, laughing. I raised an eyebrow at him and glanced at Rocco, who just shrugged. "Is that so?" I asked, smirking. Rocco smiled, empty-handed as usual. "Designated driver again?" I teased. "Always," he replied with a grin. "How have you two been?" I asked. "Great," Hayden said. "I feel like I haven't seen you in a while." Looking at Rocco, I smiled. "Because you're always hanging out with your friend here." "My friend?" Hayden teased, and we all laughed. Rocco draped an arm around Hayden's shoulders, and Hayden's ears turned pink. "Don't be shy now," Rocco joked. I couldn't help but notice how natural their connection was. Maybe Dre was right. Maybe he really was Cupid. I made a mental note to ask him what he thought about Kaysen later. Our conversation continued until Rocco spoke up. "You're always with Xander. Did he come tonight?" I realized I hadn't seen Xander after spotting Hayden and Rocco. "He did," I said. "I think I left him in the living room after grabbing a drink." "Really?" Hayden asked. "How have you two been?" "Fine," I said quickly, not wanting to admit my doubts. "We should all hang out more." Hayden smiled. "Of course." "Where is he?" Rocco asked. I frowned. "I honestly don't know." "Let's go find him," Rocco suggested. I waved my hand. "It's fine. I'll find him. You two enjoy yourselves." They grinned as I left, and my unease grew. I had lost track of Xander, and the thought of him being alone with Kaysen filled me with dread. I started in the kitchen, hoping to find him grabbing a drink. No luck. I searched upstairs and found one closed door. My heart pounded. I hesitated but pressed my ear to the door. For a moment, it was silent. Then I heard Xander's familiar voice. I twisted the doorknob and stepped inside. Xander hadn't noticed me. He was standing close to Kaysen, who blocked my view. Through the mirror behind Xander, I saw Kaysen's sly grin. My fists clenched and I bit my lip, trying to control my anger. It was unsettling how close they were. Kaysen raised his hand toward Xander, and my stomach twisted, but Xander didn't move away. "Xander!" I called softly, trying to steady my voice. Kaysen's eyes flicked toward me and he paused, a small, controlled smile on his lips. He didn't speak as he turned back to Xander, who finally looked at me, concern flashing across his face. "Kaysen," Xander said firmly, stepping slightly between us. "What are you doing?" Kaysen didn't answer, and I realized that Xander had been trying to handle him calmly. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding. Whatever Kaysen intended, I knew Xander would make the right choice, and I would stand by him. Chapter 25. My heart dropped so suddenly that I felt it sink straight into my stomach. I couldn't understand how someone could be so cruel. The shock froze me in place, tears stinging the backs of my eyes as I watched Kaysen press his lips against Xander's. It lasted only a second. Xander shoved him away immediately, sending Kaysen stumbling backward. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, his expression tight with disgust as he glared at him. "What was that?" Xander demanded, his voice strained. Kaysen laughed, a low, careless sound, and stepped aside. That was when Xander saw me. My chest tightened as his eyes widened, his mouth parting in disbelief. "Jazz." I couldn't look at him. I turned and rushed out of the room, slamming the door behind me before he could say another word. My emotions came crashing down all at once. I forced myself not to cry as I hurried through the house and into the kitchen. Hayden and Rocco were laughing together, but I kept my head down and passed them quickly. I thought Hayden called after me, but I didn't stop. I pushed through the front door and stepped into the cold night air. My breathing came out uneven, my thoughts tangled and loud. I hadn't waited for Xander to explain, yet I wasn't sure if an explanation would have helped. I sat down on the front steps, burying my face in my hands. Xander had driven me here. My car was still at his place. The reality of that hit harder than I expected. I looked up at the sky, dotted with faint stars, and a single tear slipped free. I told myself I was being ridiculous, but it didn't stop the ache. I should have talked to Xander. I knew that. A warm hand suddenly rested on my shoulder, making me flinch. I looked up to see Hayden standing there, concern written across his face. "Hey," he said gently. "What's wrong?" He sat beside me, closing the door behind us, rubbing my back in a comforting motion. I didn't answer at first. I didn't know how. "It's okay," Hayden said softly. "You don't have to tell me." "No," I said after a moment. "I will." I took a breath. I found Xander, but... The door opened again. Xander stood there, breathing hard, his eyes locked onto mine. "Jasper," he said quietly. Hayden's hand fell away as he stood. He gave my shoulder a gentle squeeze before heading back inside, leaving the two of us alone. I turned my face away as Xander sat beside me. "Hey," he said carefully. "Can I explain?" "Go ahead," I said, forcing the words out. "I didn't know what he was about to do," Xander said. "Then why were you—" The door opened again, and two guests stumbled past us, laughing loudly. I stood to give them space. "Let's go," Xander said. "I'll explain on the way." I didn't argue. We sat in silence as he drove. I stared out the window, my arms crossed tightly. "Why were you there?" I finally asked. "Kaysen said he needed to talk," Xander replied. "In his bedroom?" I asked, my voice trembling. "He didn't want anyone else to hear." "And what did he say?" I asked quietly. Xander ran a hand through his hair. "Nothing. He didn't get the chance." "It didn't look like nothing," I said. "Jasper," he said softly. "You don't trust me?" I didn't answer. "Why didn't you step away right away?" I asked instead. "I didn't realize what was happening," he said again. I looked down at my hands. "Can you see why I was worried about him?" "I don't know what came over him," Xander replied. "He's never acted like that before." "He will again," I said. "If you don't stop him." "I did stop him," Xander said. "Not soon enough," I replied, the frustration slipping out before I could stop it. Xander pulled the car over to the side of the road and turned to face me. "You really think I'd let that happen again?" he asked. "Do you think I'd ever betray you?" I wanted to say no, but I couldn't. Xander looked down, his jaw tightening. "Listen," he said, and I reluctantly met his eyes. "If you can't trust me—" He paused. "Then maybe we should take a break." And just like that, my heart broke for the first time. Chapter 26. I didn't say anything when Xander suggested that we take a break. Even though I could see how much it hurt him to say it, I couldn't bring myself to argue. Earlier, I had told him how important reassurance was in a relationship, but trust mattered just as much. And standing there after what I had seen, it felt like both were suddenly missing. I couldn't understand why Xander and Kaysen had been alone together in a closed room in the first place. When I asked, Xander's answer had been vague, almost dismissive. And then there was the part one couldn't shake. Why had they been standing so close that Kaysen was able to kiss him? Why hadn't Xander stepped away sooner? None of it helped that this happened after I truly believed we had already resolved everything between us. I felt foolish for thinking nothing could go wrong, especially knowing the kind of person Kaysen was. My thoughts were a mess as I drove home after silently stepping out of Xander's car. I caught a glimpse of him walking back into his house, his head lowered, and I pulled out of the driveway quickly so I wouldn't have to see him any longer. I didn't realize how tightly I was gripping the steering wheel until my hands began to ache. Breathing felt difficult through the tears that wouldn't stop falling. I felt weak and embarrassed, struggling to steady myself as memories flooded in. The day we first met at the hospital, all the times I jokingly called him rude, the day he met my father. Those memories only made the tears fall harder. By the time I reached my dorm, I was completely drained. I didn't want Dre to see me like that. A break wasn't the same as a breakup, and part of me wondered if I was just overreacting again. Still, I wasn't sure. I took the stairs instead of the elevator, hoping the movement would calm me down. I wiped my face as best as I could, knowing my red eyes would probably give me away anyway. When I opened the door, Dre was sitting at his desk, focused on his work. I tried to act normal and head straight for my bed, But the moment he turned around and saw my face, his smile faded. "Come here, Jasp," he said softly. That was all it took. I broke down again as I stepped into his arms. He held me without saying a word, gently patting my back as I cried against his shoulder. We stayed like that for a long time, until I finally pulled away and noticed his shirt damp with tears. I tried to apologize, but he shook his head. "I'm here if you want to talk," Dre said gently. "And if you're not ready yet, that's okay too." I nodded, wiped my face, and collapsed onto my bed. I stared up at the ceiling, another tear slipping down my cheek as Xander's face replayed in my mind. "He wants to take a break," I said quietly. Dre turned toward me, concern etched across his face. "Did something happen?" he asked. I sighed. "I walked in on Kaysen and Xander. Kaysen kissed him." Dre stiffened. "Did Xander know you were there?" "No. Kaysen did, but Xander didn't." "Did Xander kiss him back?" "Not really," I said. "He pushed him away afterward." Dre cracked his knuckles slowly. "Sounds like I need to have a serious talk with Kaysen. But if Xander pushed him away, why are you so upset?" "Because it happened at all," I replied. "They were alone together, and Kaysen got close enough to do that." "I'm not defending Xander," Dre said carefully, "but what if he really didn't expect it? They've been friends for a long time. He might not have thought twice about being alone with him. You wouldn't feel strange being alone with Hayden, would you?" I was quiet for a moment, thinking. "No," I admitted softly. "It's just hard seeing someone else that close to him." "I understand that," Dre said. "But I don't think distance is what you two need right now. You need to talk, not avoid each other. Avoiding things won't fix anything." I didn't respond, still staring at the ceiling. "If you don't work this out," Dre continued, "you're both just going to stay hurt. And I guarantee Xander is hurting just as much as you are." "I don't know," I whispered. "Think about it," Dre said. "You don't have to take my advice. I just don't like seeing you like this." "He thinks I don't trust him," I said. "And do you?" Dre, "I thought I did," I replied. "Until tonight." Dre sighed. "Trust is complicated. Maybe Xander expected you to believe in him more than you did." "I'm not reaching out first," I said stubbornly. "If that's what you want," Dre said quietly. I lay there, unsure of what the right choice was. What if Dre was right? What if Xander truly hadn't seen it coming? Eventually, the thoughts blurred together. I closed my eyes, still full of questions. And somehow, I fell asleep. Chapter 27. Waking up that morning was difficult. I glanced at the small mirror beside Dre's desk and had to look twice, barely recognizing the reflection staring back at me. My eyes were swollen from crying the night before, my hair stuck out in every direction, and I looked completely worn down. How was I supposed to go to class like this? I did my best to clean myself up in the bathroom, then returned to the room with my head lowered. The events of the night before still felt unreal, but reality was settling in faster than I wanted it to. I wouldn't be going to Xander's place anymore. And he wouldn't be coming here. I wouldn't be changing my path just to run into him. I'd be changing it to avoid him. I assumed he wouldn't want to see me, especially after everything I'd said. So when it was time to leave for class, I took the longer route and headed out earlier than usual. Xander and I shared the same schedule, and we used to cross paths every morning. Today, I made sure we wouldn't. I slipped my headphones on and turned the volume up high, letting the music drown out my thoughts. My steps felt heavy, like there was nothing ahead of me anymore, at least not while we were on a break. As I rounded a corner, I lifted my head for just a second, and froze. Emerald eyes met mine, stopping time in its tracks. My heart slammed against my chest so hard it felt like it might break. Apparently, we had both tried to change our routines. The moment only lasted a second, though it felt endless. Then Xander passed by, just another face in the crowd. I didn't realize how much that would hurt until it happened. Until I felt a warm hand slip into mine. It squeezed gently, quickly, before letting go. I spun around, but Xander was already walking away. A tear burned behind my eyes, but I refused to let it fall. What was that supposed to mean? Despite the cold air, my body felt overheated. By the time I reached class, I barely remembered getting there. My thoughts were nowhere near my coursework. They were stuck on him. I didn't want Xander to become a stranger. I sank into my seat and tried to listen as the professor spoke, but the words blurred together. I ended up leaving as soon as class ended. Back in my room, Dre sat on his bed, typing away on his laptop. I nodded quietly as I entered, not wanting to interrupt. He offered a small, uncertain smile. Moments later, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I glanced at the screen and froze. "Dad." I answered as Dre looked up again. "Jasper," my dad said, his voice tired but warm. "How have you been? I feel like it's been a while." "Not great." "I'm fine," I said anyway. "How about you?" "Good," he replied. "The counseling is helping a lot." "I'm glad," I said honestly. There was a pause. "When do you think you'll visit again? You and Xander?" My chest tightened. "I'll come soon," I said, carefully avoiding his name. "With Xander?" he asked gently. "I'll see," I replied. A wave of sadness washed over me, and I knew I needed to end the call before my voice betrayed me. I'll talk to you later," I said, my voice cracking despite my effort. "Jasper," my dad said softly. "Are you okay?" "Yeah," I said quickly. "I am." "Come by soon," he added. "I'm always here for you." "Thanks," I said, ending the call. I dropped back onto my bed, resting my arm over my eyes. "You okay?" "Dreas." "Yeah," I lied. "Have you figured out what you're going to do?" he asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "I saw him today." Dre winced. "That must have been rough." "It was," I said quietly. Then I added, "He grabbed my hand." Dre snapped his laptop shut. "He did what?" I laughed softly, for the first time all day. "I don't know why," I said. He didn't say anything. Just walked away. Dre pushed his glasses up, clearly thinking. "That's interesting," he said. I sat up and looked at him. "What's Cupid sensing now?" He grinned. "You're finally acknowledging my powers." "Don't get ahead of yourself," I said, smiling. Dre laughed. "I think." A knock at the door cut him off. I raised an eyebrow. "Did you invite May?" "No," he said slowly. "Jasper, you should answer that." "Why me?" I groaned, sliding off the bed. "I'm tired," he said, far too casually. I sighed and opened the door. He stood there with his hands in his pockets, eyes red like he hadn't slept much either. My heart skipped. "Jasper," he said softly. "I miss you." Chapter 28. "What are you doing here?" I asked, stepping aside to let him enter our room. "I was at Rocco's dorm and figured I'd stop by," he replied casually. "Hayden," Dre said, suddenly sitting upright on his bed. "What are you doing here?" He had essentially repeated my question, even though Hayden had already answered. Hayden grinned. "Were you expecting someone else? Maybe your lovely May?" Dre sighed dramatically. Cupid was hoping for a miracle. With that, he flopped back onto his bed and stared at the ceiling the way I often did when I was deep in thought. "Why did you say you missed Jasper?" Dre asked as I climbed onto my bed. Hayden took a seat by my desk before answering. "He's my best friend," Hayden said simply. "Of course I'd miss him." "It's only been a day," Dre muttered, clearly bothered by something, though Hayden didn't seem to hear him. "So," I said, intentionally changing the subject, "how was Rocco's place?" "Good," Hayden replied. "Actually, that's part of why I came by." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh. Yeah," he said thoughtfully. "I'm not sure how I feel about him yet, but I know I feel something." Dre sat up instantly. "I knew it." "Oh, hush," I said with a smile before turning back to Hayden. "What do you mean?" Hayden exhaled. "We've been spending a lot of time together, and I find myself really looking forward to it." I smiled without realizing it. Maybe Rocco was exactly what Hayden needed. "That's kind of sweet," I said. "I don't know," Hayden replied, shaking his head. "I do," Dre said confidently. "Don't overthink it. Just see where things go." Hayden laughed. "I'll try." We talked for a while longer about everything and nothing at all. Surprisingly, Xander never came up, and I was grateful for that. I didn't want to keep reopening the wound. Eventually, Hayden headed out, and Dre and I settled in for the night. The days that followed were long and painful. Xander didn't reach out. I didn't see him anywhere. It was the most miserable I'd felt in a long time. I barely ate. My focus in class slipped even more than usual. Things I once enjoyed felt distant and dull. I was a mess, and no matter what I did, Xander stayed at the front of my mind. How long was this break supposed to last? Was it actually fixing anything? One afternoon, I found myself walking toward my car, deciding to visit my father. I needed to talk to someone, and he was the first person I thought of. I didn't want him to see me like this, but I knew he wouldn't judge me. When I arrived and knocked, the door opened to reveal him smiling warmly. I couldn't manage to smile back. He noticed immediately. After we sat down, he asked gently, "Are you okay?" "No," I admitted quietly. "I haven't been." "Do you want to talk about it?" I hesitated before saying, "Xander and we broke up." I knew that wasn't exactly true, but that's how it felt. His expression softened. "What happened?" "We didn't trust each other," I said, leaving out the details. "Trust is important," he said carefully. "If you couldn't trust him, maybe?" "No," I interrupted. "It's not for the better." He looked surprised. "Why not?" "Because I still love him." Saying it out loud made everything clear. "You should talk to him," my father said gently. "Maybe," I replied. "Thank you for listening." He stood and opened his arms awkwardly, trying his best. I hugged him, holding on for a moment longer than usual. "I hope things work out," he said. "Come by again soon." "I will," I promised. When I returned to my dorm, Dre jumped up from his seat. "What?" I asked, narrowing my eyes. "Nothing," he said quickly, slipping his phone into his pocket. "You're acting strange," I said. "I'm really not," he insisted. I shook my head. "Whatever." "Hungry?" he asked, glancing at the time. "Yeah," I said. He nodded and led the way outside. The cold air bit at my skin as we walked. "Where are we going?" I asked when he turned toward the parking garage. "Shortcut," he said too quickly. "We never go this way," I pointed out. A car beeped nearby as someone locked it. I didn't think anything of it until the driver stepped out. Green eyes met mine. My heart nearly stopped. "Jasper," Dre said softly, using my full name for the first time. He stepped aside. "Go talk to him." Chapter 29. It felt as if time had stopped. The way Xander stood across the parking garage, staring at me, made my heart race uncontrollably. "Dre," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "How did you?" "Go," Dre said gently. "Don't worry about it." I bit my lip and nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Before leaving, I placed a hand on his shoulder and gave it a grateful squeeze. "Thank you," I said softly, then slowly walked toward Xander. It had been a week since I'd last seen him. A week since he had squeezed my hand in passing and left me confused and aching. After a moment, Dre quietly walked away toward the dining hall, leaving Xander and me alone. My stomach twisted with nerves, and my throat tightened until I couldn't find the words to speak. So I just looked at him. His eyes were red, and he looked exhausted. Dressed in a loose sweatshirt and worn-out pants, he looked just as tired as I felt. "Jasper," he finally said, his deep voice sending a familiar shiver through me. "I'm sorry." I stayed silent as he shoved his hands into his pockets and stared at the ground. "I don't want to lose you," he continued. "Not over a misunderstanding." I nodded slightly as his gaze lifted to meet mine. "I'm sorry you couldn't trust me," he said. "But I didn't." "I know," I said quietly. "You didn't know what he was going to do." Xander exhaled. "I understand now why you were worried about him." "And I talked to Kaysen." I braced myself. "He admitted he had feelings for me, feelings I didn't know about," Xander explained. I shut it down immediately. "I told him what he did was wrong, and that if he ever hurt you like that again, I wouldn't keep him in my life." "You mean everything to me, Jasper. Being apart from you has been unbearable." I tilted my head back, staring at the ceiling of the garage, holding back tears. He had pushed Kason away. He had been upset, even without knowing I was there. I didn't want a misunderstanding to destroy us either. "I'm sorry too," I said at last. "For not trusting you more." A small smile curved on Xander's lips, sending warmth through me. "Please talk to me when things get hard," he said softly. "I want to know when something's bothering you. I don't want us to go through this again. I hate feeling this broken." That made me laugh, and his smile widened. "Me too," I said. "You really had me emotional." He reached out and gently ruffled my hair. "I'm sorry." I caught his hand before he pulled away, holding on to it. In the next moment he pulled me into his arms, holding me close. I leaned into him without hesitation, wrapping my arms around his waist. He pressed a soft kiss to the top of my head before we slowly pulled apart. When I looked up at him, his green eyes were full of warmth. "I missed you," I admitted with a grin. Xander didn't respond with words. He cupped my cheek gently and leaned down, pressing his lips to mine. I kissed him back, pouring everything I'd been holding in for days into that moment. We laughed softly when we finally pulled away, both a little breathless. "I love you, Jasper," he said. I smiled. "I love you too." Later that night, I returned to my dorm room and found Dre apparently fast asleep. That alone was strange. He was usually busy working late. Turns out I was wrong. Within minutes, he suddenly sat straight up, nearly giving me a heart attack. "Whoa!" I muttered, clutching my chest. "Xander didn't come back with you?" Dre asked eagerly. I raised an eyebrow. "Were you pretending to sleep just so you could listen in?" "Oh, of course not," he said quickly, eyes wide. "I'd never do that." "Right?" I said, smiling. "Says the guy who lives for drama." Dre adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. "Hey, fine. What happened? Did you talk?" "We did," I said, keeping the details to myself. "And?" he pressed. I laughed and lightly poked his chest. "I'll tell you this much," I said. "You really are Cupid." Thanks for listening to today's BL story. If it made your heart skip a beat, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Only here on BL Stories, where love knows no limits.